guys, this is Timaeus. I'm here to show you 10 tips and tricks that I found useful in FL Studio 11 and above. I figured maybe you might find it useful too. So I have here a drum sequence that had some parallel compression and transient shaping to make the drums seem more powerful than they were before. So here's the before. Here's the after. Here's just the snare before. Wait. Here's after. Here's just the kick before. After. Okay. Alright, now I'm going to show you what I did to get the drums even a little bit tighter. So, what I did to the kick, I didn't turn on transient shaping yet. I have some EQ near the fundamental to get it stronger. I high pass it at around 30 Hz and below, so that there are extra frequencies that you may not need that aren't obstructing the frequencies that you do want. And here about 80 Hz is some extraneous low end that I didn't really want based on the exact kick sample that I used. Here's some scooping in the mids to execute that same purpose. Here's a high-end boost to add some click to the kick. And then this shelving is the same. This is pretty much the same thing. Now this kick is a layer of 3 kicks. Each one's routed to a different mixer track, which are each routed to the same bus. And the advantage of routing to from different mixer tracks to the same bus is that you can EQ and process each one separately. This one's pretty subtle. Okay. Now for the snares. I felt like I didn't need to EQ separately. Mostly what I did here is boost the fundamental, get the high end a little more crisp, and high pass the low end so it doesn't interfere with the kick, just in case. Alright, so now I had some transient shaping here, And I'm actually only using one of these at a time because I want to show you a comparison between a commercial transient shaper and a free one. Dominion V1.2 versus Transient Master. Okay, so here's how it sounds with a free plugin. There's some overdrive here. And ultimately, it's placed a bit closer in the stereo field using the attack, and the sustain allows it to, it stretches the envelope a little bit more, it reshapes it, so to speak. So as you may hear, there's a commercial plugin, adds a little bit more depth to the sustain. I tried to process these as similarly as possible, and this is the result I got. Ultimately, it's about what genre you're in, but this is essentially what I would have wanted if I were in, say, a big beat genre. This longer sustain could be useful in dance trance or club music or electro house or something. Now for the snare, I made it closer, a tiny bit more sustain, a little bit of gain. So now the fundamental is it felt a bit more boosted, and the high end's a bit more crisp as well. It's subtle, but you may be able to hear it. It feels boosted around 203 Hz. You can hear that more with the transient shaping. Except we didn't actually boost it with EQ. Alright, and then the only other thing I actually did was I made sure this open hi-hat stopped playing at the proper time. So I wanted it to stop playing right when a snare drum called Layer Endgame 09. Can't see it on the screen, but that's what it says. I made it so when this snare drum played quietly, because it's already being layered and it's actually already playing here, then this open hi-hat gets cut out. And to do that, I haven't done it yet, but to do that, you say cut by whatever group you want. I call it 1, and this group cuts 1. So this snare drum will cut this hi-hat. Let's hear it without it. You can hear the open hi-hat end. Now you can't hear it end, you just hear it abruptly stop. That makes your drums tighter. Alright, that's it for drum tightness. See you in the next section. Right now I'm going to show you how you can automate anything you want in FL Studio, provided you can, and if it lets you, without going into the generators and effects list. You don't have to search for your automation. You just have to be able to find a knob in your synth or whatever and then tweak it. So for example, you have a pad like this that's layered with 3 pads. So overall it sounds like this. let's say you found this cool automation that sounds pleasant. And you can automate it. Automate it down and to the left. This is X1 and Y1. So now you can tweak X1, tools last tweaked, create automation clip or a link to controller, whichever way you want to do it, mod wheel or any other. Then tweak Y1, create automation clip, and I selected this earlier, so that's why I created there. Since both were modulated down to the left overall, they're both downwards in the automation. So here's what it sounds like now. Or perhaps this variation. And yeah, you can just do that with tools last tweaked or next to last tweaked. Create automation clip. Or let's say you created two of the same. You can just do channel settings, articulator copy state, channel settings, articulator paste state. It looks the same. Once more, articulator copy, articulator paste. Just in case you're curious, I have a stereo enhancer. It's pretty old, but you know it's more visually clear than using this knob. I mean, I tend to remember whatever I put in plugins more than whatever I did here. Actually, I don't really use this at all. So I have this stereo phase inversion to the right, then low stereo separation, plus some stereo shaping here. So earlier it sounded like this. Now it's like this. Wider, more intimate, more expansive. And lastly, the automation that I did was to give it more movement, because without it would sound like this. Alright, see you in the next part. This is where I'm going to show you how I find resonances, or trying to strengthen any particular fundamentals on certain instruments. So for example, here's a sound I designed. I call it metallic or metalloid horror drone. It sounds like this. On a lower octave, it sounds like this. But let's say I created this sound without checking on resonances and taming them. So it sounds like this. It's very harsh. But here's now how it sounds now. It's much less harsh. But let's say you routed it and played this note, and you know, it sounds like this, except the EQ is flat. And you know, you're bugged by this resonance, but you don't know where to find it. Then you could do a notch EQ, kind of like this, and then sweep it through and find when the resonance disappears. If you need to make the EQ bigger, just roll your mouse wheel and change the bandwidth. So it might have been here. Let's check what it was. 6,800. So it's not bad. It's not bad, it's pretty close. Or alternatively, you could, it's kind of risky, but you could boost. That makes it way more obvious. But it'll hurt your ears more, so I don't recommend that. Another thing is that the harmonics of a particular instrument move with the pitch. If you pay attention to it, it'll be more obvious, but you know, this harmonic near 500 Hertz is going to move when you go up an octave. It's about here. Kind of moved about 100 Hertz. It's not really a clear pattern because you have to be able to spot the exact frequency, and if you don't know what it actually is, then the math doesn't really apply quite that much, because I don't really know where it actually is. It's just an estimate. Now let's say you wanted to boost a particular frequency that you like, but you don't know what frequencies give the quality that you want from the sound. And you could sweep a notch, peaking boost and find what you like. Pretend it's not over boosting. And there's a frequency that I would have liked, so it adds a little bit of warmth in a dark way. That's even possible. Without it, it just sounds hollow. And depending on your audio system, you may want to do this anyways. Even if the sound already sounds kind of good, it may sound better, who knows. Alright, see you in the next part. So, another thing that I thought would be important was that should watch your effects signal chains. Make sure that they're doing exactly what you want them to do. So for example, this is the Impact Meteor Slam sound from the sample library Juggernaut by Impact Soundworks, run by Andrew Aversa and Will Roger, the second, I believe. Here's it EQ'd. Now let's say, I don't know, you wanted to add some overdrive. Sounds a bit distorted, it's kind of clipping right now. Now you have some compression, parallel compression. Let's say you wanted to smooth that out with some reverb. The compression is still there, and the clipping is still there, but it's less obvious since the reverb's at the very end. But let's say you did the reverb first, just because you chose to do it first, rather than you moved it first. That's louder than it was before. And the clipping is more obvious when the reverb is placed first. Now if you place the EQ after versus before the compression will boost the EQ as well, instead of, you know, EQ fixing whatever the compression output is. So here's compression and then EQ. Here's EQ and then compression. It's louder. Or maybe you can see it now since there's a spectroscope. Try and freeze it. Currently it's like this. Now with the EQ before the compression instead of after. It's louder. Now again the normal processing signal chain that I would do would be distortion and then EQ. No, distortion and then compression, then EQ and then reverb. But of course the distortion on this impact was just a way to exaggerate the differences. So yeah, make sure your signal chains do exactly what you want them to do. So for example, if you had a sound, you want a good delay on it, and then reverb, then you put the EQ and then the delay and then the reverb. But don't put the reverb and then the delay, because if you put the delay first and then the reverb after, the reverb makes the delay more ambient. But if you put the reverb first and then the delay after, the delay add some echo to the ambience, which makes it a little bit more muddy. It may be subtle depending on the context, but that's actually what happens if you put it that way, because your DAW likely, if not always, processes your effects according to the signal chain, which is why there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in this background here behind the effects. It means the top effect is processed first and the bottom effects processed last. So yeah, see you in the next part. So now I want to show you how to automate more than one object or item with one automation clip. So for example, again, let's say you like this modulation. That involves moving X1 and Y1, but you know, let's say you want it moving exactly diagonally. Then you'd be automating X1 and Y1 in the exact same way. So, you know, instead of having two automation clips like this, Y1, X1, it feels clunky. So, you know, what you can do instead, tweak X1, link to controller. This is linked to X1 and Y1, that's good. And then next to last tweaked, link to controller. This is also linked to X1 and Y1. So you link both objects to the same controller, e.g. Zebra2 X1 and Y1 envelope, and then this one automation envelope automates both X1 and Y1, or whatever parameters you want. And that's why it moves perfectly diagonally. So the benefit of automating more than one object or parameter with one automation clip as compared to 2 or 3 is well, you have less clutter in your project file. If you have a big project file, like I usually do, with like maybe 40 layers, 50, 55, it's happened before, then you know, the less automation clips you have, the less clutter you have. And if you can, it helps both to conserve memory and to conserve space in your project file arrangement, to condense your automation clips down. So one, you'll be less confused when you open up your project file later on, and two, it's smaller, so it takes up less space in your hard drive, no matter how minuscule the contribution is anyways. So, you know, efficiency and whatnot. Alright, let's see you in the next part. Here I'm going to show you a sound that has 8 effects, and now let's say I want to EQ it some more. You may recognize it from my Gunstar Heroes remix over at Overclocked Remix. It's on the Gunstar Heroes Be Aggressive album, and it's at gunstar.ocremix.org. And while you're at it, you might as well check out the rest of the amazing remixes by such people as Flexstyle, Ectogemia, Evectalo, Phonetic Hero, Chernobog, and so on and so forth. So, let's say I wanted more effects, like I said, then we could route it to another mixer track in serial, so that you're routing to this one, and this one is routed to the master. So you can get a chain of these 8 effects and these 8 subsequent effects, and these will always occur after these 8. That's pretty much it. Now just make sure you don't route to the master and this mixer track, otherwise you're doubling your dry signal and it just sounds louder. Not to mention your dry signal isn't processed by this mixer track yet. So you get a mixture of both the dry and the wet. Alright, see you in part 7. Here right now I'm going to show you the benefits of using a volume multiplier knob and a parametric EQ2 slider for the gain, not instead of, but in addition to the volume knobs here, the channel volume knob here, the mixer track volume knob, and the mix level slider. Now currently this example sounds like this. It's something I kind of threw together in like 5 minutes, nothing impressive. Now the balance sounds pretty decent. Alright, now you can see what I did here. So I used the volume multiplier knob in addition to this channel volume knob. So from what I've done with this, I found that this acts sort of like a quote-unquote dominance knob. So the higher it is, the more or less it steps on top of another instrument. This is just a straight volume knob, but what I found is that the response to the knob tweaking is relatively linear compared to, let's say, automating this or automating this or this, especially this. Because if you try automating the volume here, it doesn't fade out all the way, I believe. You can kind of still hear it. Now let's say I automated it with this. Compare it to this. So from that, I would believe that this mix level slider automates the volume down a little bit more quickly than you would actually like, but this is relatively close to what you see. But it's not only that, but now since you have the volume multiplier knob and the parametric EQ2 gain slider, you can use both and be flexible in how you balance your instruments. So for example, you can either have this at maximum and have this at normal. Or you could decrease this and bring it back in the mix, and then bring this up to raise the volume by itself. Now the other way. That's the parametric EQ knob, or slider. It's more or less a preference, because this changes in plus or minus 18 dB, and the other is just between 0% and 200%, so it's a percentage. Whether you prefer in percentage or dB, you can pick one of these, or if you get comfortable with both, you can pick one or the other, or both. Alright, that's it for this part. See you in part 8. Here I'm going to show you the benefits of summing partially to mono. So here I have a demo of a pad in mid-range and a drone in the low end. It sounds pretty full. Now, why is that? Let's turn everything off. Actually, okay, yeah. Let's turn it off this way. Now let's turn the EQ on. Okay, so the low end drone is wide, but the mid-range pad is also wide. So, you know, you have two elements that are wide. It's kind of like two elements that are both narrow. So you kind of want to narrow one of them in order to make room for the other. It depends on which one you pick. But in this particular case, I wanted the pad to be expansive, but I wanted the drone to just lend some low end, but it doesn't have to be as expansive. So I chose to narrow the drone. Subtle, but it adds some clarity to the pad. Something that also helped was the stereo phase inversion and stereo separation and some stereo shaping. Without it, it sounds like this. That is summing partially to mono. If you want to do this, you just use something like Fruity Stereo Enhancer or some sort of stereo separation plugin that allows you to do the reverse. In FL, you can use either Fruity Stereo Enhancer or this knob. Personally, I prefer the plugin because it helps remind me that I'm actually doing something to the stereo field. If I have something here, it does the same thing, but it's less clear if you look back in your project file and you want to know what you did. That was basically just doing the same thing but with two different knobs. So yeah. See you in part 9. Here I'll show you the benefit of stereo phase inversion. So of course it inverts the phase of whatever sound you put in, but another benefit is it brings the sound closer to you. So if you have speakers, it jumps out at you, and if you have headphones, it jumps to the back of your head. So I have here a percolating ARP example. You could do it with the Free Stereo Enhancer plugin. It used to be this, I believe, and then it got shifted to these knobs. About 100% sure. With this, you can just click none left or right. Personally, left and right seem very similar, but I tend to pick right. I tend to find this useful in thick soundscapes where you have a bunch of narrow elements and wide elements and panning elements, and you want another way to make something distinct. And you can try this, why not? And if it doesn't sound that obvious to you that it's changing the stereo field, I'll narrow it so you can hear it. You should hear it jumping out at you. Yeah, just for fun. Alright, thank you for watching part 9, and see you in the last part, part 10. Okay, this is the last part, this is part 10, and I'm going to show you the benefit of automating the compensation frequencies. So what is compensation? Compensation is when you have a thick section in your remix or song or whatever, and the frequencies that you have on any of your instruments are already exactly where you want them. Let's say you're in a section where you don't really want to tweak any more EQ because it would ruin the EQ in the other sections that you had prior. Then if you don't want to ruin that, you could always automate the EQ bands in a parametric EQ and then unautomate them after the section you're in. So let's say you had this. Now, let's say you wanted to automate down 1500 hertz. It's already down, but say it was up here. If you don't like it, you can automate that. Like so. And then you automate back up here. Or let's say 294 was the problem issue. Automate that down. Actually, let's say 136. You can copy the value, undo it, automate, set that value, then bring it back to how it was after the section is over. And you have automated EQ. So let's move this forward and pretend there was stuff back here. Alright, let's watch how the EQ bands move. And I'll tweak it so you can see it more obviously. Alright, now watch EQ bands 2 and 5. And now it's more optimal for this section. So yeah, if you have a section where you have EQ that's so thick that you still want to adjust some more to make things come through more clearly, but you don't want to adjust something that you've already used before because it might ruin the other sections beforehand that you already were happy with, then just automate the bands and then unautomate them when the section is over. Alright, thank you for watching this 10-part tips and tricks tutorial, so to speak. I hope you had fun, and I hope if you found this useful. Thank you, and I hope you listen to my music sometime, and I hope you have a good day.